fire! Ah! Oh no, my bike's on fire! If only I checked my electrical connectors. Oh, who can help me? Never fear, power sports enthusiasts, for it is I, Commander Connector from RMSTATOR's Echo Squad, the electrical connector help operatives. I can tell that this fire was caused by old corroded connectors. With knowledge of RMSTATOR's connector circle of death and proper application of RMSTATOR's electrical connector kits and tools, you can be back on the road in no time.
Hey, I'm Evan, Head of Engineering for RMSTATOR. As you learned from Commander Connector, it's super important to maintain the connectors on your motorcycle. They can cause lots of problems. Okay, so we're going to talk about using the RMSTATOR soldering iron to make a permanent repair or a permanent connection. Now, a lot of times you'll see people will do this to repair the connection between basically a failed connector between a stator and a regulator. And there's obviously lots of other uses and places on a wiring harness where you need a soldering iron. So it's good to know how to do. I don't necessarily recommend doing a permanent hardwired solder connection for your stator to regulator. Much better to just replace it with new connectors, but in a pinch that does work. So I'm going to show you how to do it. I have our soldering iron turned on, and I have the heat turned up all the way because I'm using fairly large gauge wire here to illustrate it. So to start, I'm going to cut the insulation back, and since I'm kind of illustrating it here, I'm going to give myself 3/4 of an inch or so on each side. So using some wire strippers, or wire cutters here, I've cut the insulation and pulled it off. You can also use those ratcheting wire stripper tools, which are a lot easier. So make sure you get down to good, clean, bare wire. If there's any corrosion or anything on the wire itself, it's going to prevent a good solder joint. Okay. Then I'm going to use a piece of heat shrink here, and I'm going to slide it onto my wire. I'm going to move it a couple inches back so it's not going to be affected by the heat of the soldering iron. So now there's lots of different ways to do this. I prefer making my connections like this. I twist the wires together. So basically I cross them and then twist them from both sides as tight as I can. So then when I'm done, I have a good kind of interlocked connection between each end of the wire, and it's folded in on itself, and it's not much bigger diameter than the wire itself. So the heat shrink will fit fine, and I have a good tight connection. This will also hold the wire in place on a wiring harness or on your bike, so you can make the connection, make the solder joint without the wires coming loose. So to start, now our soldering iron comes with a sponge here that you can get wet and you can use to clean the tip of the soldering iron. I like these a little better. The sponge will work fine, but this kind of foil material in here works great to clean the tip, and you can get these on Amazon or any electronics supply place. So you can just press the tip in and kind of turn it around a little bit, and you'll get a nice clean shiny tip. So to start, you always want to tin the tip on your soldering iron, so you want to use some of your solder and melt it on the tip and make sure it's flowing well. Okay, and then I'll usually clean it just a little bit, so I've got a layer of solder, but it's also clean. So to start with a good solder joint, you want to use the fat part of the tip, and you want to hold it down on what you're soldering first and let it soak up as much heat as you can. So I'm going to press it down against my workbench here and let it heat up. And then after it gets hot, I'm going to add solder to the wire itself. And you'll know that if your connection is hot enough, as it should be, you can just melt the solder directly onto the wires that you're soldering. You don't really want to have to melt it onto the tip of the iron itself, because that doesn't help it flow down into the strands of wire. So I'm going to add it, move the iron a little bit, add it all the way across, make sure that it flows well. And then I'll usually move my iron underneath too and just make sure that it is flowed completely on both sides. Okay, so that looks good. You can see that the solder's flowed down into the strands of wire on both sides, and that's going to completely lock it together and make a good connection. Now, after every time using your soldering iron, every single solder joint you make, it's a great idea to clean the tip and then tin the tip of the iron with more solder. So if you completely cover the tip like that before you put it away, you can leave the iron hot and you'll never kill the tip on the iron. Well, you will eventually, but it's going to last a lot longer. If you don't tin it like that, the tips can overheat and burn out quickly. So now that I have a good solder joint there, I'm going to slide my heat shrink up over the connection. And then I just use a small lighter and run it over the heat shrink. So now I have a good, permanent, completely sealed and insulated electrical connection. So the RMSTATOR soldering iron is excellent. It uses tips for a Hakko soldering iron that you can get online easily. You can get them in all different shapes and sizes. And this is a great additional tool to your workbox or your workbench for making repairs on your bike.